Welcome, friendlies, to Lunching with Lawyers and Randal Dennings. Randal Dennings is an adjunct professor at the T.C. Byrne Law School at the University of Queensland. He was the lead partner of Clayton Ut's National Governance and Compliance Division. In this role, he advised extensively in the public, private and not-for-profit sectors on governance, legal risk and compliance issues. Randal retired from legal practice in 2016, but remains active in his committee memberships and is also a member of the Banking and Financial Services Committee. Randal chairs the University of Queensland's Law School Pro Bono Centre and is a regular lecturer for the law school. He's always been a great mentor for others, and I looked up to him as a bastion of all knowledge credit. Well, at least for the industry side, for many years. And that's reflected in the fact that today, when I was speaking to somebody and I said to them that I was going to interview Randal Dennings, the first thing that they said, he's a really great bloke. And welcome, Randal.
Thank you very much indeed, Rhoda.
So, Randal, I don't know much about your background, so tell me a little bit about where you grew up and where you went to school.
Sure. I grew up in Greenslopes on the south side of Brisbane, and my mum and dad moved there and bought the first specky home that was built for the Greenslopes estate. And my father went to Greenslopes State School. Therefore, by definition, I must go to Greenslopes State School. And so I went there, and it was a great place to grow up. The baby boom had passed through Greenslopes at that stage, so there was only a few kids and lots of older people. And the centre of the universe was the Greenslopes Repatriation Hospital, now Ramsay Hospital at Greenslopes. And
so were you a regular visitor at the hospital?
Yeah, no. Because of my father used to work at a foundry that was based in a suburb at Greenslopes, just up the road from the Repatriation Hospital. And they had a lot of army contracts, and he was an essential worker. And it was known as the Snowden Foundry. Mr. and Mrs. Snowden owned it. And my dad would often go on pilgrimage to see Mrs. Snowden and take me with him to see her. And the whole suburb was just absolutely focused on doing what they could do for returned vets and to assist them in recovering. A lot of the prisoners of war came back there initially after the war.
From the Vietnam War?
No, from World War II.
Yeah.
And of course, then ultimately Korea and then Vietnam and the other conflicts. And so as a result, that was always a part of our life. We were always, through our church, as youngsters, we'd always be caroling through the Christmas time. A lot of the nursing staff would attend our church. We were very involved with the Red Cross that was involved there, and it was, as I say, it was really like the centre of the suburb. And Anzac Day, at dawn, the whole suburb would come to the chapel at the hospital. It was it was a great place to grow up, and very, very strong community, and everyone was was on the lookout for each other, I suppose, and that was a good way of growing up. So lower sort of middle class, bit of a mixture of sort of folks, and
how do you think that shaped you as a man and as a lawyer, that background?
I think I think a lot of first generation university students or first generation lawyers, you come with a deep appreciation of how privileged that you are to have a chance, have a shot, and very, very grateful to Mr. Whitlam for giving us an opportunity to have a free education and a real sense of an obligation to pay back. And I think we had, in Greenslopes, there was a lot of people who'd migrated to Australia, to live in Australia. So we had a lot of quite a diverse range of people, mainly European. A lot of
there was a big migration of
through
the 50s,
and because it was
60s,
Greenslopes at that stage, like now it's very upmarket and ritzy, but at that stage it wasn't. So it was quite a range of backgrounds and people, and you're friends with people from very different backgrounds at primary school. So.
And so, what drew you to the law?
My first love was to go into the army, and
I thought it was going to be a woman.
No, come on, no, that was way from the horizon. No, I always wanted to be in the army. To my uncle Bob, who was a World War One veteran, at one point, in horror of him seeing me eulogising how great it would be to be in the army as a 10-year-old or whatever. He explained to me actually what it was like to be in World War One. And after that, I thought, law sounds good. So and he was horrified because he had the view that law was anything but helpful to people who desperately needed access to justice, and warned me against it. But in any event, that was sort of always in the back of my mind for no other reason. Probably watch Perry Mason or something. And but as I went to high school, the guidance officer. I have to say, many guidance officers have not particularly helped those that I know, but the guidance officer I had was very thoughtful, and he indicated that he thought, I think law would be good for you. I think you'd be a good lawyer. You've got the ability to, you never shut up, you always talk, so you've got the gift of the gab. But he also said there's a sense of, really a sense of altruism there that would be helpful. So I guess that confirmed that decision. And then when I started doing law at university, I really felt
And where was that?
found the right place.
Was it UQ?
UQ, yeah. UQ started. I finished Brisbane State High School in 1975. Started in 1976, and that was the second Whitlam year. So we had a massive amount of people coming through, and the infamous every year we're going to be massively trimming the numbers here. So you really have to, it's okay to get in, but you're going to have to work really hard and work, because only a certain number are going to come out the other end. And so it was a good meritocracy in that sense, but it kept your nose to the grindstone.
Well, I think talking about that, because I've spoken to a lot of women that graduated or that are around my age and graduated through those years of free university education. And they said it was a great boost for women because they could get into university because there was free university education.
I can remember very clearly that within the profession at the time, people were incredibly surprised to find, I think in the time that I went through, I think the feeling was something like about 65% men and balance women, and then those numbers rapidly reversed, and so now I think it's now 80% women, 20% men. Like, it's really quite a significant change.
But there still isn't that many women at the top of their professions.
No.
What can you do about it, Randall?
I think within a number of law firms, quotas have been adopted and things of that nature. But within, I think, my experience of that is that the vast majority of partners, men and women, are determined to have a basis, to have a gender-free selection process. It's got to be on merit, and to have processes which mean that women can't make the contribution. You've got half, by definition, you've got half of humanity that you're not giving an opportunity to support the firm and its clients. And given if the numbers are now sort of becoming greater than that, it really is shooting itself in the foot. So I think it doesn't surprise me at all. It's taken longer than it should, but it doesn't surprise me at all to see that the number of women partners are becoming much more respectable numbers, and the trend line is. And I guess once you get a critical mass going, then that'll run. So I'm very confident in the not too distant future. You'll see that that issue of gender equity would be largely, hopefully, a matter in the past, and that changes the whole paradigm of the practice.
I think it's a very different practice. Well, I've always worked amongst probably too many women, being in the not-for-profit sector, but I think it is nice to have some gender balance even the other way as well. It makes because different people have different perspectives, and I think that's not just true from your cultural background, but also from your gender.
Yeah, but and I was just about to make that point. I said, I think we've gone some of the way with the gender diversity, but we've got a lot further to go with wider diversity. And I know in practice with my group, we would often have a very wide range of cultural backgrounds within the group, and that just gave so much. I mean, in so many ways, the insights that you would get from someone who comes from a totally different cultural background, it really does. It gives you a much better handle on the issue and how to go about doing things and various insights, and it's there really is the old story, that a team of champions will always be beaten by a champion team. That's the way it is.
Oh, that's a great quote. So, but you've been at Clayton Utes. Well, you were at Clayton Utes since 1979.
Way to go.
Was that your first job on graduating?
Yep. Lamentable lack of initiative. When I graduated, you could not get a job for love nor money, and I knew no one. So it was really, really, really tough. I used to be able to pick figures off the top of my head, but I think it was I lodged over 100 applications for jobs with people in the mail and going in person and all that sort of stuff, and I had 30 interviews. So it was just outrageous, the number of interviews, and frankly, if you don't have any social capital because you've come from the wrong side of the tracks and don't know anybody or whatever the case may be, I wouldn't have given me a job. It was
especially in Brisbane. I would have thought that was quite a smaller profession.
No, it was a tough time. At that time, it was that people weren't taking on lawyers, etc. And but anyway, cutting a long story short, one of the many places that I went and just did the city, went along Logan Road doing dropping off CVs with Gay Abandon. But one of the firms that I dropped off in the city was for Trapanese and Tingle, and I got a phone call saying, "Come in, we're looking for an article clerk," and there's 100 people. They're all exaggerate. 15 people going through this, all of which looked far better prospects than me. But I was and remain a bookophile, just absolutely enamoured of books, and I'd done a bit of work with at State High in the library as a volunteer, and for whatever reason, no one else had done that, and so they the role they had was to be an article clerk, but to have responsibility for whipping the rudimentary library within the firm, within Trapanese and Tingle, into shape. They had quite a good practical library, but it had languished, and there's no one took responsibility for it. No one wanted it, so they thought, we'll get an article clerk in here at sort of $70. Was it $70 a week to do this, as well as doing some other stuff as well, and at least I had some experience, and I guess the other 15 didn't.
Gee, I wouldn't have thought you'd get a job because of your library skills.
Well, no.
I've heard of, your the religious backgrounds, all sorts of other things, but library skills.
Yeah, well, as I said, and I remember the first day I walked in, I say people start at 8:30, it was at 8:30 on Monday. I sort of turned up at typical Dennings, turned up at 7:45 or whatever the case may be, and no one's there, and no social capital whatsoever. And one of the partners came in and said, "Who are you?" "I'm the new guy. I'm starting today." "Okay, well, you're in the library, aren't you?" "Yeah, that's right." "Okay, well, in there, away you go." And I walked into the library, which was smaller than this room, with a desk about this size, and it was covered for about 9 inches of unfiled CCH. Following reports. Go to it. And so
we don't even have those anymore.
No, it's all electronic. And but that was my introduction to the job. It was a mess. It hadn't sort of been done, but towards the end of it, the firm, I really enjoyed it, and the firm would get me to do research on points that sort of went, this is a little bit difficult. Okay, we'll get the Arbor clerk to do some research on it, and I just did the best that I could, and I wasn't an expert in any area, and produce like a paralegal, I suppose, producing like a bit. Well, this is what I thought, and then the person who I produced it to would oftentimes take the time to say to me, "Hey, look, that was really helpful. That was good, but you missed this and this, and what about that?" And there's that case is just on appeal, so you need to watch to see what happens there. And I learned a lot from that process, and at the end of the time, the firm Travanese and Tingle said, they were happy with what I'd done and what had happened. They said, "Look, we'll make this a permanent sort of gig," and we had another couple of article clerks after me came through and took on that role, and they sent me down to Sydney, and I had 2 weeks, and I was in 3 top tier national law firms working in their library.
Oh, really?
And they wanted, and obviously the firm had made these arrangements, and I had to come back and do a report on, looking at what they've done, and then looking at what we've done, and looking what was going forward. What would I suggest to the partners would be a good way of maximising our investment, because libraries cost a fortune.
Yeah.
Information systems. What would I suggest to be done? And I'm pleased to say that the majority of those recommendations were taken on board, and it made the job of those that came after me easier. And of course, in the fullness of time, the library, is now the hub of legal advice. We've now got, and within the firm, we've got a fantastic librarian and librarian staff. And I've always, we've always had secret trysts to catch up and exchange, and they can keep me up to date. But I'm very IT unsavvy, and so I've been left behind in that regard. But I always hold the library in high regard, and the librarians, the law librarians that do the work, are brilliant people.
Oh, they're so good.
I really enjoy that.
And so the founder of the Clayton Utes Library.
Oh no, I'm not the founder.
I know, but
I was merely involved with one part of Travanese and Tingle.
So, did they then merge with Clayton Utes, or how did Clayton Utes come about?
Travanese and Tingle, which was primarily an insurance and finance company firm, merged with Henderson and Lay, which was primarily a commercial and property firm. So it's a really good mix. And as only lawyers can do, it was then called Henderson Lay Travanese. Travanese, I think. So and then that was shortened to Henderson Trout. And we within Travanese and Tingle had always had a very close relationship with Clayton Utes, and we were their Brisbane agents and done a lot of work. And we had a whole raft of clients in common, and I guess it was so like many of the firms in Brisbane, did mergers and associations and things of that nature. It was only natural that we looked at Clayton Utes, and Clayton Utes looked to us, and then eventually Clayton Utes became a national law firm with firms in Perth, Canberra. Clayton Utes Sydney had formed a firm in Clayton Utes Melbourne, and also Robertson Cox in Perth, and so that all became one national partnership at that point, and then ultimately became financially merged and sort of doing up from there.
And when did that happen for Brisbane? Like when did? Yeah.
Oh, it was. Look, I'm sorry. Don't.
Oh, I'm just interested. It's in the midst of time.
From my perspective, I can remember very, very clearly all the discussions about what we wanted to do, and it was from a Brisbane perspective. We were always very. We've had wonderful leaders, You know, the founding, the senior partners of the firm, it's Leon Trout, who passed away just before I joined the firm. The firm was still in mourning at his loss. Sir Neville Henderson, who I knew and had some regard in dealing with, and he was a fantastic fellow, and Len Van and George Deeb and Alex Freligas, like these guys were all, titans, of that generation.
Yes.
And they all had, and essentially they were saying, look, we could stay here and keep on doing what we're doing very nicely, thank you very much. Or we can actually make way for younger partners to come through and to have the strategic vision and foresight to be wanting to serve our clients beyond just Brisbane, and to have the right mix of clients that would be able to support the practice. And it was a really good time. I've had a great career. I'm really, really happy about that. But it was really good to be a partner during all those times, and to be led by that generation of partners, then following through with the Michael Cluggs and Jeff Harleys and Brian Wilsons and all those guys. I mean, it's just, we were very, very lucky to have great leaders, and we just watched the whole Australian legal market mature and develop.
Yeah, it's been a great time to be alive, actually.
It has been.
Really good.
Great time to be a lawyer in Australia, and the sort of work that we're doing was as good as anywhere in the world. It was really good, and to be, I found being at Clayton Yates was really a genuine national partnership, and so as a result, I was involved in transactions and with clients all around Australia, and many of those clients had international connections. So it was really great. It was a really good. I found that I really enjoyed the fact that I was operating beyond just simply Southeast Queensland. Although there's nothing wrong with Southeast Queensland, but it was good to have that experience. And I really enjoyed diversity. I really enjoyed working with my partners and each office had a very different culture about it. It's not wrong, just rich. And I used to really enjoy sort of going into that, and used to enjoy going into Sydney office with hustle and bustle, and going to our Melbourne office, and it's a bit more chillaxed, a bit more. Going over to our office was in Alan Bond's building for many years. Just watching, and almost like the building is almost shaking with stuff deals happening and all that sort of stuff. It was, and up to Darwin where it was all very exciting. So and down to our beautiful offices in Canberra, which was so well integrated into picking up all the federal government work. It was a great experience.
I was going to ask you, because you did travel a lot for Clayton Yates, and for a time I remember seeing you once on a plane where you were going down to Sydney every week.
Yeah, it's essentially, when I was the lead partner of that division, we had a range of practice areas that were spread around the country. I had direct operational control over the group in Brisbane, but I also had a leadership role within nationally. And so, and you just got to go to where the clients are, where their clients to be, and to do the governance and compliance work. It's not something you can do sitting in your office. I would find many clients would actually say, I know you're based in Brisbane, we see more of you than we do of many of our other law firms. Because if you're really wanting to find out where people are at, you go and visit them in their office and see that and get interview. You can actually sort of get a bit of a feel by walking around about the culture of the place and what's going on. And so much of the governance and compliance arrangements derive from that culture.
And I think Zoom and I think working from home, I think they're great innovations, but even from my perspective, dealing with clients and particularly vulnerable clients, nothing beats face to face.
And we were with the University of Queensland Pro Bono Centre, we're really reaching out to try and support rural, regional, and remote pro bono, and that's one of the hurdles. Is that on the one hand you can say Zoom is fantastic, or Microsoft Teams, or Internet, or whatever the case may be. Well, that's great, but the point is though is that it's a lot harder to build trust and rapport.
Absolutely.
It's one of the sayings is that you can only build trust at a walking pace. And I was experienced on a number of occasions. We signed a memorandum of understanding with the Supreme Court of Papua New Guinea, with the University of Queensland, Pro Bono Centre. And the Chief Justice had to come to Brisbane for a range of reasons. And he said, I want to meet the various people that are involved with the centre. And he, looked us in the eye, shook our hands, and made a couple of comments. He said, I want to and sought personal assurances before moving on. It was quite, there is that sort of, there's a power of personal presence that and particularly when you're in a crisis or a difficult situation. That wasn't that, but with a client or with a partner or whatever, as you go through the tough times, you never forget that.
I think once you've met somebody face to face, had those interactions, built the trust, then you can do a little bit more online or electronically. You don't have to see them all the time, but until you've got that, it's very difficult to build that just on the phone.
You've to move from a outer ring of relationship, vendor purchaser, not a supplier of services or someone who's got knowledge that you need in a pro bono context, to actually move to become a trusted advisor into that inner circle. That's a big step to take, and it's hard to do that if you can't see the non-verbals, you can't press the flesh, and you don't really have a chance for some small talk.
Or to share a glass of wine.
Or to share a glass of wine, exactly.
So, Randal, how long did it take you to make partner at Clayton Utes?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Well, look, off the top of my head, I think probably about 8 years. 7 or 8 years, and at the time, I wasn't sort of, as I said, I wasn't very. To be honest, I wasn't very. I didn't have a lot of social capital. I wasn't someone who was particularly ambitious. I always felt as if those around me were better, brighter, smarter, quicker than I was, and I'm astounded by the talent and quality of the people that I worked with. They were, like as my peers and superiors, they were, really good.
I know that you say that, but I mean, everybody that I speak to that knows you says that's the characteristic of Randal, is he's so humble.
Oh no!
I mean, honestly,
No, I'm not being humble. I can assure you. That those around me were genuinely brilliant, and my marks weren't all that flash, and the day when I did the pitch for the job, I said, look, I won't be the smartest medical clerk you've ever had, but there will be few that'll work harder than I do. And that's sort of the mantra that I sort of brought to it. So I was happy to put in the hours, and I really tried to make up for that which I lacked by being methodical and sort of diligent and trying to do that. And as you build up a bit of expertise and carry on, you can start relaxing a bit more about that. But as my mentor, Paul Corbier, used to always quote, I think it was Cicero, the price of contentment is eternal vigilance. You just really do need to to keep an eye on that, and that. And so I was not really looking for that sort of promotion, if you understand what I mean, and I suspect that others could have perhaps gone a bit better than I got ahead of me because of that. But at the end of the day, I was just astounded by the fact that even though I had one firm, I had like about 9 careers doing different things, and I'd find that I honestly was very lucky, and I think I had good mentors, good partners that helped me, and when I got into becoming a partner myself, I don't know, I talked a lot to people to try and work out, where a good place to be doing things in practice, etc. And consumer credit was a good example of that, where I was in the banking finance group. This whole new regime's coming in. They sort of went, well, who's going to?
Well, was this back in 1984?
Yeah, this is who's going to pick this up? Who's going to pick this up? And someone's got to pick it up.
Was it 1984?
Yeah,
wasn't it?
And then
the
guy who was a banking finance manager, John Petrie, came to me and he said, I'm going to actually become managing partner of the firm. I said, oh, John, that's fantastic! Congratulations! You're a young fella. This is extraordinary. He said, yeah, and he said, so why don't you do this credit code stuff? So, I know a bit about it, but no more than anyone else, but I don't really. He said, no. He said, I think you'd be really good at that. You've got that. I think you'd like it. It's a challenge of the new piece of legislation, and you can make it happen, and all that sort of stuff. And I said, oh, do you really think so? Yeah, give it a go. That'd be good. Oh, okay. So he said, I'll introduce you to AGC. Who need a bit of help. Sort of to doing all that sort of stuff. And so next thing I know, I'm doing all this great work. And just construing the documents, relying upon the cases in New South Wales and Victoria, and all this sort of stuff. And Lex McGilvray called and said, hey, I hear you're doing some good stuff on that. Let's come into the Law Society, and why don't you get onto this banking and finance committee? And Lex was great. He was really a good mentor for me, and so I started off from there, and I really enjoyed the practice. Eric Enning from Allen's, he was another leading, and Alan Thorpe from Western Cross, as it was there. They were like the leaders in that area, and they'd be having views, and I don't look, with the greatest respect, I see it a different way, and so we have those conversations, and I guess in Queensland, we like in other states, they tend to be very adversarial, one firm against another, but in Brisbane, it wasn't like that. Like we were more trying to just help our clients damn well comply with the whole bloody thing, the bit of a schmozzle. And we had wonderful relationships with the legal aid and the consumer. We're all trying to get to the same end. You know what I mean? And so it was a great experience, and with good clients, and that was the way that started. And
so, were you involved in any of the civil penalty matters?
Yeah, I ran. I'm pretty sure I ran almost all of them. I think in Queensland under both the Credit Act and the Credit Code, because they sort of got to the case where a lot of people wouldn't run the cases because it's a bit of a.
Oh, they were huge matters.
Yeah, it was because it's a quite a challenging. It's you never know what you're going to find, and
they were the boon for the consumer movement. Civil penalty cases in the early 90s. They gave all the funding to.
And it was a bit like if you weren't firing blanks, like it was pretty full on. But I had a great deal of respect for the matters that we did. Were always very principled matters with consumer advocates. That wasn't the case in other jurisdictions. We had some really good matters, and it was done in a very good way. And I'd have to say, with some exceptions, I think the government, the Department of Justice and Attorney General, they were generally pretty good. Every now and then there was a rogue civil operative, but generally they were done pretty well.
Well, I must admit, I started practicing in the early 1990s in Western Australia, and it was a very nice profession over there as well. Congenial.
But that wasn't the case in other jurisdictions. It got pretty feral, and those of my clients who were based in Melbourne and Melbourne and New South Wales, that they were very worried about the way that matters were conducted in Queensland. So we're not like that. But it was good results.
I think it was a very nice way to operate, and
we got good results at the end of the day. We got good results for the consumer, and no civil penalty was imposed. So and to make sure it was a fair outcome, and at least in my humble opinion, those results were the right. Those outcomes were the right outcomes that were involved.
Yeah, no. I'm going to ask you some stuff about about your personal life, but I wanted to keep going because of these 9 careers. Because you moved from credit into compliance.
Yeah. Well, what happened?
Why?
What happened there was Suncorp. I did a lot of work with Suncorp, and Suncorp, when they time came to Consumer Credit Code, you may, I don't know whether you recall this, but when that code came in, it was aimed to come in on a Friday, because they thought just in case something goes wrong, the financial services, the credit providers would be able to have the weekend to fix up their computer systems. Right? And but you could go in early and just have documents that purported to comply with the code if you wanted to. You just had to be careful not to say it was code compliant when frankly it wasn't. But you could still do it early.
Yeah.
So Suncorp was bringing in a whole new computer system at the same time, the Hogan system. So it was like a massive change for Suncorp to do that. And Judy Luffman was the general counsel there, and a couple of other wonderful people who we work with. And so the goal that Suncorp had, commercial goal that Suncorp had, was to have the system in and operational weeks before the date, so that when the date crossed over, it was just going to be a doddle. And through an immense amount of hard work on behalf of, we had a team that was involved, an immense amount of hard work on behalf of that team. We got across the line, and everyone else's systems crashed.
Oh, wow.
And so Suncorp, was on the page saying we were, no problem, come to see it. We'll take your loan application. We'll fix it up. No worry. So it was a great success. Hell, it was a great success. So a couple of months after that, I was approached by Suncorp, and they said, we need you to help just do something with workplace health and safety or something like that. And I said, I'll put you on to our workplace health and safety lawyer. And they said, no, for God's sake, we don't want you doing any law. We don't want you. We know you wouldn't know anything about that. But under the Credit Act, under Consumer Credit Code, under the Credit Act, you had to have 100% compliance, or else you lost your interest. You have to make a civil penalty application. So compliance was taken very, very seriously. You had to have a really rigorous compliance system. And so we got to know that, and we all learnt about it on the fly. And I palled up with a broker named Brian Sharp, who came out of general counsel, and was general counsel of a lot of major companies, Alcoa, AMP, and he was like one of the leading Australian lights on compliance, and he was like the father I never had. He was just fantastic. We got on really well, and I really enjoyed working with him, and sharing thoughts and many glasses of red wine. It was all good. We got on very well indeed. And anyway, so Suncorp said, no, we just want you to do the compliance structure. Help us with all that stuff. And I said, oh, okay, look, I'm happy to help in the way you think I can, but I'm really in a credit sort of lawyer. And I really enjoyed it. It was just fantastic. And so I said to Brian, this was just really good, doing this compliance stuff and setting structures in place and setting in place, incident escalation procedures and, sort of doing root cause analysis and complaints and, this is just absolutely fantastic. This is, setting up complaints categories and measurement systems and just fantastic. And Brian said, can I work with you? And I said, would you? That'd be great. So we sort of, he became a consultant to the firm, and we had a ball. It was really good fun acting for lots of good clients and doing lots of good work. And Suncorp loved it, and we just had a ball with a whole range of clients. And then that's when people started running into a prang with a regulator. They would say, look, you need to get a bit of compliance. You need to fix that up. Who are you going to call? Where are you going to go to sort of help out with that? And that's where we were privileged sometimes to help people. So
you were ahead, really, of the game at that stage.
Yeah, look, at that point, Brian, I would say Brian was a thought leader, and I was, he was a real thought leader. And he and Bill D from the ACCC and a whole range of other people, but they were the two major ones. They were the ones that got together and came up with the first AS 306, the Australian Standard on Compliance. And so, then that was in 1998, and then it was updated in 2006, and then it became an international standard. And I was the Australian representative for the Australian representative for the Law Council of Australia on the international drafting standard for the 2015 standard, and now there's just been a new standard in 2021. So it's been a really good ride, and you've got governments now asking people to ensure that their systems are set in place so as to meet the governance standards, the risk standards, and but lamentably, Australian regulators haven't. They're still talking about the old AS 306 standards. So I'm hoping that that position changes and they start talking about the international standards and setting that up as their guideline. And the federal court picked up AS 306 and started using that as a guide to see whether or not companies should get the benefit of due diligence defences and things of that nature. So that was worthwhile.
Oh, it's worthwhile.
Yeah, no, it was great fun. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, but I met you in the 1990s when you were entrenched in credit compliance. Mm-hmm. And I remember you being on a committee investigating for the Office of Fair Trading, investigating whether an interest rate cap ought to be legislated in Queensland. Mm-hmm. I also remember the disappointment of getting the final report where you didn't recommend the interest rate cap. Why was the committee so against interest rate caps at the time?
That's interesting because... my recollection is that we did. It may be that it might have been initially no. That might have been initially the case, because. But I know at the. I think what the issue, if I remember correctly, at the end. I'll start again. This is my recollection, but it may well be muddled by dementia and alcohol. My recollection was that initially we were very concerned because one of the banks that I acted for, one of the actuaries was a mate, and I'm enumerate. I can't. I don't. The higher mathematics.
Typical lawyer. Yeah, that's all right.
And I was really concerned because the interest rate the cap calculations were markedly different all across the states. All different. And I looked at this and I could see that what the proposal was that they would be, like picking and choosing different bits from different states and putting it together. And the assumptions they put in were from one state and the mathematical calculation was from another state. And I said, well, I wouldn't. So I asked the actuary, and the actuary said they'd actually made a mistake in the mathematical calculation. It was wrong. I was on the Law Society committee with Lex McGilvray from Illinois, and so our initial reports were, as a matter of policy, the Law Society is reluctant to get into. We're all about the administration of justice. And efficiency and effectiveness, and don't want to get involved in sort of more industry or consumer policy matters. We're happy to leave that go. And so we said, look, we're not going to make a call on the interest rate cap in a matter of policy, but we were concerned that there were a number of technical issues with the assumptions, and in particular this calculation.
I think too. I think if I recall, one of the issues was that, because the interest rate cap at that time was proposed at being 48%, which it was in some of the other states, there was a fear that would end up being the default position.
Well, what then happened was that I think that happened, and then it sort of all went off into Neverland in Queensland, but then it came back again, and and then even then again, it followed the New South Wales definition from memory, but was slightly different. They had a couple of slightly different things in it, and the Law Society, and this was my own work. I suggested that they needed to have, rather than saying this is a maximum, because then that encourages people to go straight to the thing. I had what I call the Plimsoll line approach. In other words, to be able to say you had to, it was up to you as a credit provider to set whatever risk parameters that you thought was right. But at the end of the day, there was a limit that you could set that was a mixture of both capacity to pay as well as interest rate. So that what we would now look at it and say your target market is wrong. That is not a fit product for purpose. And just in the same way that you can't overburden a ship beyond the Plimsoll line, you can't overburden credit as a Plimsoll line. And so the government was enamored of that and thought that was a great idea, until they appreciated the second part of the proposition, which was that in the event that you had people that were needing assistance that would drive them under the Plimsoll line, then they should have access to regulated low interest funding being provided by the government. But the government wasn't interested in that. So that led to that being but ultimately the Law Society, I'm very proud to say, under my chairmanship, did support the introduction of the cap.
When it came in 2008, which was a great, I think it really showed a lot of people working together.
That was very controversial. That was very controversial within the committee, because there were some that said, okay, we shouldn't be getting involved. And others thought, no, it's the wrong thing to do. But I think on balance, we at that time there was a huge issues of people charging amazing
$1,600
strange deals, and so on balance we just thought that actually was then a justice issue that needed to be dealt with. It was
a great time when we did that, but again, it wasn't quite strong enough. I think the introduction of the code in 2010 was a real boon for. It was really good for consumers.
And that was that was hammered out in Dick Viney's bedroom at a Blick conference. The compromise of, because the big sticking point was the automatic loss of interest. And so that deal that was sort of hammered out there was where it was a compromise, a genuine compromise between the parties, and gosh, where it is.
I'm going to put in the show notes what happened in Dick Viney's bedroom.
Oh no! Well, no.
It's to say that you did it.
But you know the story. You know what happened. So Dick went round and those who had expressed an interest in the area, he just called everybody into his bedroom, probably about 20 people, and just sort of said, "Okay, I'm not going to walk away from this without getting
an agreement.
Heads of agreement." And people realised this, if it was going to happen, it had to happen now, and it did.
It was a great thing. It was a really great time, I thought, of industry and consumers working together. How did you, though, become... Now I'm going to take you a little bit off centre and ask you, how did you become involved in the UQ Pro Bono Centre then?
Oh, good question. What happened was we were at an AGM for Q-Pilch, as it then was. And it was Paul O'Shea, it was me, and it was Simon Cleary. And we were bemoaning the fact that there wasn't any organisation that could stick up and help consumers who had genuine consumer credit issues, and they couldn't, they got some help somewhere, and the wonderful people from Legal Aid, for example, and the consumer, etc. But there wasn't someone who could really get on and take it further. And everyone's a generalist. There was no one who could really go on further.
Not in the community legal centres, was there? There was a little bit at Caxton, I'd say.
But the vast majority of people that were seeking help from CLCs or whatever, they were getting help from journalists, is I guess
Yes,
that's what I'm making.
that's right, yeah.
And a lot of people that knew a lot about it are either going to have to be cloned or they're acting for the other side, acting for the credit providers. And so we said, there's got to be a way of getting through this. And so during the course of the evening, and as the red wine was consumed, we said, well, why don't we set up a bit, like a bit like, a group to have like a pro bono approach with a confederation between the University of Queensland, Paul O'Shea, Clayton Utes, and Q-Pilch. So we got Tony Widget over and said, well, what do you reckon of this? And Tony said, great idea. Well, if all we need is someone who can pull it all together. We need someone that can sort of be the case like this. So we all pledged to go back to our various parties, to various places, and sort of talk to the powers that be and see what could be done. So I went back to Clayton Utes, and Jeff Harley, as senior partner, said, look, that's a great idea. We're happy to support it. And we're even happy to put a person in part-time to be able to, to pull that all together. And in the fullness of time, Tony said, well, I'm up for it. And Paul O'Shea said the UQ's up for it. And so then okay, Randall, this is your bright idea, make it work. And so I said, so I sidled up to Linda McPherson and said, what do you reckon? And God bless her, she said yes. And she was fantastic.
Because she was working at
CLAC, the Consumer Law Advocacy Centre, CLAC. It was a raging success. 900 cases in the first year. And it was the prototype of, the UQ clinic. Students raved about it. Everyone loved Linda. Paul, of course, went on sabbatical. So Ross, this is the time when hard work had to happen. But he, in all seriousness,
Well, he'd had his glass of red wine.
Paul did all the things to set it up, and then after he was finished, he did that. And so that was, I'm pretty sure that was one of the first ventures that UQ Law had into that whole pro bono area. And so Paul then, and Ross was sort of thrown in to sort of as a newcomer coming in from New Zealand to, be the academic in charge of it all. He loved it. He thought it was great. And in the fullness of time, he became dean. He just said, well, so he and Paul then said, well, why don't we make this wider than credit? Yeah. Why don't we make this a whole centre for the whole? And so they called me in and said, well, what do you think about that? And I said, I reckon that'd be great. It'd be good to do that. And so one thing led to another, and so it was launched 11 years ago, 12 years ago now, almost 12 years ago. And under Monica Taylor, it became, she just took it, she was fantastic. She took it to be a force to be reckoned with humanitarian law and women's domestic violence, sort of prisons, refugees, environmental defenders office, and you name it. It's she took it to everything, and now we've got Mandy Serkor, who's come in, ex head of school at JCU, and not only a great academic, but she's got pro bono qualifications right all the way through. She's now taking it on to a whole further level, adding in elder law, and now we're pushing on this triple R and working in conjunction with University of Southern Queensland and JCU to really try and help bring pro bono services using the students in support of the CLCs in the West. And that's a wonderful project that's what we're currently working on at the moment to do that. It's really good.
Support practitioners out in the West, or
to those practitioners who are wanting to do pro bono work, but primarily for CLCs. We, as part of this whole project, we've been dicing around with it for a couple of years, and when you start talking to the practitioners in the West, they do huge amounts of pro bono, but it's not organised pro bono, if you understand what I mean. Pro bono is the work that comes to their door rather than and so there's a lot of people that just suffer in silence that could get a lot of pro bono help, but because for every hour of pro bono that's provided, there's 25 that are needed.
Yes.
The quiet wheel suffers and no one gets help. So what we're trying to do is to provide, using the academics and students, is to provide ways of leveraging out that hour just to help more people. And Mandy is, she's got all sorts of wonderful possible projects, but she's very keen on a justice bus idea of students and academics and CLC members going out on circuit.
A lovely idea.
Helping, and going right through central Queensland, so that's one of the ideas, but that's just an idea, it's got to, I'm really glad the university's got behind it, and we're ways and means of how to do it now, and going to the profession and seeking support to help it happen.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How can city practitioners actually assist regional and remote practitioners in that practice, and also to help First Nations people?
I think it's a tale of three cities, isn't it? You've got the larger law firms have got really sophisticated pro bono systems and Indigenous advancement programs and stuff like that. Within Clayton Utes, it was really heartfelt. Reggie did. I came that close of getting up to Bathurst Island, to being able to work for a Christmas program up there, but I couldn't get up there because we had a matter that went crazy, so I had to send off one of my outsiders and she had a ball. But we had people that go out to remote communities and run legal clinics. What Clayton Utes would send out would underwrite and make sure that if we had IT equipment or whatever that was being upgraded, still good. But, out it goes to Indigenous communities. We had a really close. We had a national conference in Uluru, with the Arunta, and it was like we all had that person-to-person experience.
Face-to-face.
And it was really. It was that was really good, and we had Indigenous and First Nations program to have them on staff and to work with them as colleagues. That was fantastic. So that's one city, and then in the smaller program, it's all scalable. You've got to have, at the end of the day, it's just be on the lookout, doing what you can, and then for the micro firms, there's heaps of single practitioners that I know that they will do what they need to do to help people who are interested in law, who come from an Indigenous background or from the wrong side of the tracks, to take them on as sort of paralegals and stuff like that, to show them what it's like and to see how that sort of goes, or to take on matters pro bono. Recently, I was approached through our church to try and find some assistance for some folks from South Sudan that were running into difficulties, and I was amazed at how the practitioners that I approached, who had indicated that they had Dinka, they had the language, etc., how they were happy to just do what needed to be done, we worked in conjunction with the relevant cultural officers within the Queensland Police Force, and they helped straighten out a lot of misunderstandings with some of the prosecuting police officers that were involved. So my sense of it is, it's a question of, it's easy to say, hard to do, of being able to lift your head away from the million and one things that are on your day-to-day plate, and to make some space to do something extra with wider purpose. And I find on the larger end that private practitioners in the West, stereotypically they're either, I'm now probably overgeneralising, and I apologise if I offend anybody, but there's a lot of older practitioners in the West who are struggling to find someone to come through, and to find someone to take over their practice, etc. they've got a whole range of issues that they're dealing with, and yet they still do a lot of pro bono work. And you've also got others who are the more younger practitioners, many of which are single parents, lots of kids to look after, huge financial pressures to perform, and they're on every committee doing everything, and they've got a huge swag of pro bono clients that they look after from as well, and I hold them in utmost respect. It's the practitioners of the West. They're really upholding the finest traditions, but they're really struggling. It's good to see.
It's hard when you've got to earn an income.
Yeah, the law. We had we holidayed up at. I won't disclose the nature of a triple R town. Quite a few years ago, and
what's a triple R town?
Rural, remote, and regional town. A triple R town, and we'd often sort of said within the Law Society, we've got to make sure we protect these solicitors in the triple R's, because the bigger firms look after themselves. We've got to protect, particularly the triple R's, and give them the information they need, help them out. They're tough guy. So I thought this was a golden opportunity to meet up with someone. And Sue, my wife, said, but you're always talking about this. Well, why don't you just sort of go in and see him? Because there's only one. You can go in and see him. See what he's got to say. So I was, I haven't got any clothes. Maybe some little shorts. And come on, and so I sort of went and I just said to the receptionist, look, who I am. I'm here for a week. If I had the opportunity, if I could have just have a cup of coffee, or I'll take him to lunch or whatever, I'd just like to have a chat, because it'd be really good to know more. And within about 15 minutes, he's out. He's taken me to lunch, and I learned more about life as a triple R practitioner than I ever knew before. And basically, he's not there anymore. He just couldn't make it work, and he was doing pro bono. The magistrate would drive him out on circuit. He was doing some paperwork, but it was largely doing pro bono work as well. And you can't talk to clients, I think, because there's a magistrate in the car. Even when you could get towed in that stage, it's high cost. But nevertheless, he felt that was what he was had to do.
People often think that you have to work for a non-government organisation or government to really affect the shaping of policy in Australia. Mm-hmm. But that's not your experience, I would suspect. Do you think working in a private sector made it easier or harder to affect law reform and policy change?
Neither. I think you've got to have there's an advantage, in the sense that, I've had the privilege of a number of Queensland Attorney Generals seeking specific input on really technical points, and I just knew them, or whatever the case might be, and they sort of said, look, I just want to get something straight from the shoulder. What do you think about this, that, and the other thing? And because you're dealing with those sort of issues a lot, well then, that does help. Yeah. So that's good. But on the other hand, wisdom, I'm passionate views about a whole range of issues, and you and I have been sometimes on the other side of each other and those sort of things. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that wisdom is a multifaceted jewel, and it's being able to contribute your bit. Yeah. And as I say, the vast majority of outcomes are genuine compromises. No one ever gets everything they want. So it's a matter of making sure at the end of the day that the consumer
is a win-win.
Gets a fair shake, and if you keep that as the focus of what you're doing, at the end of the day, if you're a bank or you're a finance company or you're a superannuation company or you're an insurer or whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, you've got to work, as Jeff Harley, my senior partner, we used to always say, you've got to work out, are we in a business or are we an institution? Because if you're in a business, you may do things for short-term gain. Yeah. But if the firm had its 100th anniversary 30 years ago, whatever, 10 years ago, whatever, within the Brisbane office. We wanted to be there for 100 years later. And if you're going to do that, you've got to have integrity, you've got to have ethics, you've got to have your client's best interest at heart, you've got to do the best thing. And if anyone traduces that, well then they're not going to have a long-term future. They used to always say, Alex really just said, we always want marathon runners, not medials, and I think the same thing applies for financial services institutions or any major corporations or banks or whatever. If at the end of the day, eventually truth will out.
I think so.
And it's not. And you can't have a sustainable business unless it has an ethical background, an ethical basis, and a good product to sell.
Yeah, because otherwise you lose trust.
Oh, and trust is so hard won, and so easily lost, sometimes genuinely by fleet of circumstance, and people will draw the wrong conclusions, and you then got to work and work and work and work and work to build back that trust. So, from my perspective, I think we had some wonderful experiences when we were involved in flood legal.
Yeah.
When we the legal aid, all the law firms, the universities, all got together and threw together that legal aid program to get it out into the emergency services and to help lawyers come to grips with all that disaster flood sort of law, And then we had some insurers who really came to the party and they were focused on their insureds, and we had some who weren't. And I think it was great of Flood Legal, led by Tony Woodgett, running those test cases with hydrographers, to bringing out, raising funds from the profession to bring out international hydrographers with international reputations to be able to have evidence to stand against the insurance companies hydrographers who are arguing, didn't come down, it came up, and all that sort of stuff. It was that was a
great thing. Yeah, it was a great. That was a great time as well.
But that's that our whole idea of
collaboration,
and facilitating change in the way of doing things. With the ultimately efficient effectiveness and access to justice at the same time, giving the consumer a fair shake. And generally, at the end of the day, it means you get a fair profit out of it anyway if you've got a sustainable business.
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing a bit of research about you. I found out that you and your wife are long-term parishioners of St Matthew's Anglican Church, Holland Park, and a member of the Diocesan Legal Committee. So the question I wanted to ask you, what role has faith played in your practice of the law?
I think it's been a really important part. I've always tried to do my practice in a way that would be reflecting, consistent with the part of the articles of my faith, and fully believed in the end of time. If I didn't do that, I'd have to answer for it. But more to that, I think, I think everyone has a reason why they get up in the morning to do stuff, and that guides what you do. And if you're really wanting to get up in the morning to make a difference in the world, to make it a better world, to do that sort of stuff, that is something that is a very powerful motivator for the long term. And there's no finish line. And it's something that you get derived for your little victories. Stuff that happens, it gives you a great sense of satisfaction. So I think many lawyers tend to be Myers-Briggs, like ISTJs, introverted sensitive judgment thinking. Whereas my personality type is one that's more NNFP, sort of more sort of needing to have a reason for life and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very lucky that my faith has given me that. And from a pro bono perspective, it's I just find it incredibly fulfilling to have that wonderful coalition of being or coalescing of being able to, practice my profession, and in the course of doing that, being able to be consistent with the faith and wanting to consistent with the articles of my faith, and also to literally, I was in prison and you visited me.
Yeah.
I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was, and at the end of the day, I think it's the role of a lawyer is to the fullest extent they can, is to really try and have a good sense about what's just and what isn't, and to the extent that you can, within the power that's available to you and the wisdom given to you, to the extent that you can be on the side of the angels.
I think
it's not a bad thing.
I think our whole legal practice is steeped in, a Christian faith or Christian ethos anyway. And and if you have a faith background, I think you get ethics a lot easier than if you don't have such a faith background. It can be more challenging.
I know heaps. It's really interesting. I had the privilege of a discussion with our recently departed governor, Paul de Jersey, and I was asking him, what did it mean to be a Christian judge?
Yes.
As opposed to being a judge. Like, have you... And he said, well, one thing it's not is you've got to give this... It'll be the same decision whoever you are. So it's not about the outcome, but perhaps it's more about how you get to that. You can do it in a way, and I'm now trying to think of the name of the appeal court judge who retired not so long ago. The lady, I've just mental blank. You'll have to edit this out to put in her name. But she was interviewed by the ABC on her last day, and he said, what's one case that stands out for you? She said, one case that stands out for me, I've never got the answer to it, was this lady who she had a discretion as whether or not she would put her in jail or give her another chance.
Yep.
And so she did the usual, this is your last chance. Gave her another chance and never heard of her again. And the sense of it that I got out of that was that she was motivated by a sense of discernment that this person was capable of change. That she picked that up from the bench and urged to exercise on them at the moment to give it an extra go. And it was beautiful that the woman's mother was listening to the ABC when heard that comment, and the way that she described it, she knew that's my daughter, and she's living in America, so she called her in the middle of the night, and the daughter called the ABC to say that changed my life. That changed my life, and she said, I'm now married with children, and I'm here in America, and and my husband's serving in the military, and I'm a military wife, and I work part time, and I was really on a wrong trajectory, but she gave me that chance. And Judge, I just really want to thank you for that, etc., etc. So my sense of it is that it does really make a big difference in what you do, and it is a small victory. It does make a change, and it's we all have an opportunity of. We'll have an opportunity of, as my wife often says, we're all innkeepers. Sometimes we've got to work out whether there's room for Jesus.
I'd love to leave it there, but I just want to know what the Labyrinth Network is. I have to ask you that question as a final thing.
The final thing. Well, look, I can't let that go.
So Randall's moving off to show me what the Labyrinth Network is.
So there are many different types of labyrinths. So what's happened was we went to Chartres Cathedral in France, in the Loire Valley, for its 9th century glass, and it's the first Gothic cathedral and full of history, and it's the only extant cathedral that from that time that was untouched by war and all that sort of stuff. And just loved it. And at the time, I remember hearing something that there's a labyrinth on the ground, and I didn't hear too much about it. And so we turned up, and sure enough, there is a massive shard labyrinth at the beginning of, as you walk into the church, and it's sort of 60 foot across, all that sort of stuff, and a unique design. And asked people about it. No one knew too much about it, so we had a bit of a stumble and thought that was weird. And then I came back to Brisbane, and at that stage we were living close to St John's Cathedral, and so I just popped in for a midday service because not a lot of Anglican churches in France.
No.
and I walked through, and they've got a miniature sharp labyrinth inside the cathedral. And so I went through that stage, a mate who was taking the service, and I said, "Hey, what's all this? Nice, what's this all about?" And he said, "Let me tell you all about it." And it's been around, labyrinths in. Have you got darling? Can you get a classical labyrinth? Labyrinths have been around in all the countries of the world, going back. You can get them in Australia 60,000 years. I mean, they've been around forever. And Jung sees it as being almost like it's an archetype that comes out of our own consciousness. And people would do it, and they would walk it with their fingers. Like that.
Oh, so it's actually.
So it's they're the classical designs.
Yes.
And so people would do that, and and there's another design called the Baltic design, which is up in the north areas, and all different traditions, etc. But it's all about this is an angel wing labyrinth, and so what you do is you just put your finger in there and just let your finger do the walking.
So it's relaxing.
It's meditation. It's relaxing, and it's an opportunity for you to stop, get rid of the hurried part of life, and just
chillax.
Take it easy. And this one is one that you use when you're wanting to uphold somebody. You just pray for that one person as you do. And so we became enamored of that. We thought that was all pretty good, so we've been involved with getting assisting prison chaplains, bringing a labyrinth into prison, so prisoners can have an opportunity of being free while they're incarcerated. We're working at the moment with trying to get into a hospital, and we've put labyrinths into churches and at universities. And it's just simply, in our hurried, rushed and busy lives, an opportunity where people can just chillax, have 5 to 10 minutes where they can just be with themselves, or with God, or with the universe, or whoever they believe it to be, and have an opportunity to get in contact with who they really are and take it from there.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question.
I warn you, I can go on for a while.
Well, unless there's something else that you really wanted to tell me, I think that's a lovely place to leave it.
No problem. No, the only comment the only thing I do need to add to that is I've always enjoyed working with you and Catherine and all the other consumer advocates over the years, and I think it's always been a mutual respect, and we've got good outcomes in all the matters that we've worked with. I'm very happy with that. I'm also very happy and pleased and proud to have worked with wonderful people within the firm, my offsiders and those who are ahead of me, and that I felt that I've always been a beneficiary of that. But all of that I could have not done if I hadn't had a magnificent, beautiful wife who has been my stalwart from the get-go and supported me and everything that I've done, and in particular the wrong things. And I've had, particularly. On often occasions you have to make some tough decisions where your family comes second.
Yeah.
I've tried to make that, not on many occasions, but sometimes it has. And I have to say that, even in my children, who were really happy to support me in doing that. So from my perspective, I think I'm a very privileged and lucky person to have such a supportive family, and I'm really one of the major reasons. After I had my heart issues, yes, as Michael Clegg said, you've got more bypasses than Clem 7. After that was a key factor. I thought, look, I really enjoy what I do, and I really don't want to do that, but my health was determined I couldn't do that anymore. And it's a great time to be able to sit back and have hopefully many years with my wife and family, and that's been its way it is. And so now I'm doing all the stuff with the Governance Institute and University of Queensland, and being involved with the church and other bits and pieces. But I'm doing the things and UQ, I'm doing the things that I'm wanting to do, and I'm doing the things I'm saying yes to, and that's been a great privilege and a blessing.
I can't add anything more to that. Thank you, Randal, for sparing the time to talk to me. If you want to find out more about Randal, there are show notes with each of my episodes, including contact details for each of my guests on my website, www.lorettacrete.com. Please drop me a line if you have any questions or know of someone who may be interested in being interviewed for this podcast. Till next time, friendlies.